Hello everyone, and welcome back. Now, as you can see, today's video comes to you directly from virtual reality. I just want to spend a few minutes responding to some of the amazing comments that I received on the last video I made about the Metaverse. Now, at the end of the last video, I asked you guys what you thought about the Metaverse, what you thought was important, what you thought the future needed to be. And all of the comments I received were not only fascinating, but really switched on. So I thought for today's video, we'd turn it into a game and respond to a few of them. So I've scattered them procedurally around this world, and I've had an AI voice actor perform a few of them. Now, let's go find a few.
I would love to see a more seamless integration between the internet and VR. My hope is that in the future it will be possible to visit any website in VR, enabling the visitor to access it in new ways.
Yes, this is a really important point that people are making at the moment. Firstly, thank you so much for your comment. But yes, I've seen a lot of people talk about the lines between what we think of as the internet and the metaverse blurring over time. And in the future, just accessing 3D digital worlds the same way we'd access websites and select whether we want to experience them virtually in 3D or the old-fashioned way using 2D screens. I think for the foreseeable future, it's probably quite likely that we will have app-based metaverses. But in the longer term, hosting different metaverses on websites, the same way we just host, a website full of different pages, is a really amazing way of making it incredibly accessible to people using different kinds of devices. So yeah, I think long term that's definitely the direction that we're going to be heading in, is starting to see the internet as basically just having a meta layer almost that we might think of as the metaverse. And finding a way to transition all of the various apps that we see at the moment into online systems, I think, is one of the bigger challenges coming up in the future. So thank you so much for your wonderful comment. As an aside, one of my favorite things about VR is still just exploring worlds and exploring spaces. It really just doesn't get old.
There are some things that need to be considered for a truly universal metaverse. This is something that we can dive in on from mobile to PC to VR. The metaverse should also be able to view and browse classic to the websites within it. It should be able to run multiple websites at once live, over network, with anyone within the terminal's draw distance. The metaverse should have some solutions for allowing users in world to create their own worlds.
I mean, absolutely, yeah, you've reached two really good points here. I think the first one, very similar to the previous comment, is just the notion that we need to start hosting metaverses on websites and having people be able to choose whether they want to access content in 2D or 3D. I think that's definitely one of the more likely directions metaverse development could go. In terms of actually doing this over networks, in terms of coordinating thousands or tens of thousands of players in one space though, I think that's actually a much bigger challenge than many of us, probably even myself included, realize. And the people that are able to properly solve this first and actually build out these kinds of hugely complex worlds that we've seen in fiction, I think they'll do quite well. And then with regards to creating worlds inside virtual reality, I don't think we're quite there yet to have the same level of resolution and detail that you can have with 2D tools just yet. There are some amazing VR design tools out there, but they still do feel a little bit less accessible than a lot of the more established tools, and that might just be a process of development or changing. But even today, right now, with things like Unreal Engine, Blender, you can do some absolutely amazing things building out 3D worlds, and the barriers to access to get these tools are getting lower every year, so it's a pretty exciting time to start and get thinking about this kind of thing now.
I remember writing my first email back in the 80s when the possibility to write email had just launched, and thinking, this is novel. I wonder if it would take off. I had no idea that I would be now thinking about contacting a friend or client over for in my space. Virtual meeting at home.
That's a typo.
In the office. Or for a private viewing in my gallery or whatever. Just a mere 30 years later.
I mean, yeah, I completely agree. The pace that technology has come along in the last 30 years has been absolutely mind-blowing. Even just since I was a kid, it really is. And I think we're only just getting started with regards to how we build and share 3D information. I think there's still a lot of work to do, but I think the future could be really exciting if we put the work in.
You think the metaverse will be to our kids what the internet was to us growing up?
Oh, that AI
We've
voice.
seen it come from just something small that only nerds use, to everyone using it for everyday use all around the world.
Yeah, I absolutely think that that's going to be the direction things are going. I mean, even right now, there are some absolutely amazing metaverses that people casually use every day to meet up with friends, things like VR chat. But yeah, in terms of using metaverses as ubiquitously as we use, say, social media, I think we're a little way away from that still. As an example, when I first got into virtual reality in around 2014, it was absolutely just an interest for nerds and tinkerers. And although some people think it's been a bit slow, over the last few years it really has exploded. And all of a sudden, thanks to things like Oculus and Valve, there are millions of VR users every day. So VR is really coming along, and I think the metaverse will lag a little bit behind that, but I absolutely think that that is probably the direction it will be going, long term as well. I do think there's some more maturing with metaverses first to happen though.
Personally, when I think of Metaverse, I imagine a replacement for our current form of the internet, not in the technical background, but in presentation to the user. Instead of websites, it would be spaces. And the Metaverse would be the hub world to connect them, similar to a browser with a search engine, just represented as a virtual space to immerse in.
Interesting. Well, yeah, for me, again, the approach that I take with metaverses is the more the better. We can have many, we don't just need to have one, the way that we've seen in, say, certain key standout pieces of fiction like Ready Player One. I think for the end user and for creators, it would be a lot more interesting if there were thousands, even tens of thousands, millions of creators building out metaverses the way we build websites today. I mean, can you imagine if there was only one website, the one company that controlled the whole internet? It'd be a lot less exciting and a lot less varied and diverse and accessible than what we have at the moment with millions of different players in the space. So hopefully at some point we'll get more standardized frameworks and probably still use tools like Unreal or Unity to build out these metaspaces and then find a way to really seamlessly jump between all of them. I think, as I say, for now, they'll be app-based, but long term I think we'll see them all get integrated a lot more in one of a few different ways. Anyway, thank you so much for the comment. Now, let's move on.
The internet itself, as you stated in the video, is already a metaverse. It's just that most of the interfaces of the nodes we currently have on the network are made of text, images and videos. It's just that the form it currently has is not yet advanced enough to have the beautiful VR world nodes you described in the video. But it will, and quite soon I think.
Yeah, I tend to completely agree with you there. Now, over the last couple of months, a lot of people have been asking, what is the metaverse? And I tend to think of it as basically just a spatialized internet. But if we were to be a bit more abstract about explaining a metaverse, all it really is a network of ideas connected together by people across decentralized spaces. I would say that the internet in that sense is very much a type of metaverse, and you could probably argue that we've had types of metaverses for centuries, whether it's been through books, through folktale. It's kind of a universe outside of our physical one, usually composed of ideas. But in the way that we're talking about it right now, it's quite a lot to do with kind of building a spatialized series of meta-networks, I think. As you did mention slightly lower down. But yeah, for me, I think these kinds of opportunities to build these kinds of worlds are absolutely coming. I absolutely love virtual reality, I absolutely love video games, I absolutely love the idea of metaverses and building them out more, which is why I've been working in VR and Unreal Engine so much, because I just think it's some of the coolest work you can do at the moment.
Metaverses are not only going to be in VR. Currently, VR can give us feeling filter senses, sight and sound. Imagine if we make a computer which connects to our brain. We go to sleep and feel the world with all of our senses. It will be just like real world.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like what you might be talking about is full dive VR, which is something that has existed a lot in fiction, but right now is a heavily complex field of study. It kind of transitions outside of typical computer science into neuroscience as well, trying to interact with the brain and figure out a way to press all of these sensory buttons that our organic sensors would usually press to make a completely believable virtual world. I think it's really cool, but also I think as a problem to solve, it is a massively complex one. So when this will come, if it will ever come, who knows? I would hope it will, because I think if we do it right, it'll be amazing. And there are definitely a lot of big companies working on the problem right now. As for when it will start being introduced as a type of VR, I think it will remain to be seen.
With the level of tools now on offer,
I'm confident that just about anyone with a little training will be building at least Metaspaces, worthy of anyone's exploration. Now, and even more so in the future.
Yes, I completely agree with you here. So I think one of my absolute favourite things about digital tools becoming more accessible over the years is the way it can transform how people approach and solve problems and teach them new skills. So to tell a story, when I first started studying architecture at university, we very quickly realised that all of us had something in common. We had all first started learning about design or thinking about design by playing The Sims, where you could build houses. And it all got us thinking spatially, falling in love with designing things, to the point where we tried to turn it into our career, our lives. And I think since then, some new tools have come along that have blown that out of the water. Minecraft, as an amazing example, has probably been the biggest one, and it's been one of the coolest things to happen to young people, I think, in the last decade or two, because it really is such a powerful tool for creation. And through it, at a very early age, at any age, you're starting to prime people to think about designing, creating, telling stories. And the quality of worlds that they're building has never been seen before. So yeah, I think giving more people access to more tools is one of the biggest things. And I think the Metaverse hopefully will continue this trend on in the future. Now, if I hadn't programmed this next bit myself, I might be a bit more surprised about the change. But I love the way you can overlay different types of virtual space on top of each other. Once again, if this wasn't all planned, it might seem a bit jarring.
Loop alert! Loop alert! The Metaverse has been invaded. Please proceed to your nearest logout point. Loop alert! Loop alert! The Metaverse has been invaded. Please proceed to your nearest logout point. Simulation complete. Thank you for participating.
No, thank you. Obviously, I just threw that little interjection there as a bit of fun, but one of the things I love the most about virtual spaces is the way you can do different things with similar kinds of spaces. It makes it an adventure. Just like exploring the real world, things aren't set and planned necessarily in one way. You can do different things. And that's one of my favorite things about the potentials of Metaspace.
It will be very interesting to see the influence that these creatively limitless spaces will have on the real world. How will art, media, architecture, education, etc. be changed?
Yes.
I imagine a sort of feedback loop of inspiration and creativity. The freedom of VR worlds influences the technology and aesthetics of the real world, which in turn allows for a deeper immersion back into the VR worlds. Nuts.
Yes, this is one of my favorite comments because it touches on something I think new kinds of tools do in a really interesting way. When you give people access to new ways of learning or thinking, all of a sudden you see so many different industries and ideas surrounding that, or not even related to it, absolutely explode out because you've suddenly primed people to approach and solve problems in new ways. We've seen it with the printing press, we've seen it with books, we've seen it with the internet, and it helps across the board the whole of our culture or species start to grow and evolve the way we think. And I think the Metaverse, especially if we can give it to as many people as possible, could really help us take a few next steps along this trend as well.
Let's not forget that AI will get to the point where it can create a metaverse on demand. If a neural network can recreate GTA just by learning GTA, it's conceivable that you can simply ask the AI to generate a world which are realistically experienced using a neural link.
Yeah, I think this kind of thing is definitely on the horizon. I think for me personally, the next logical step would be designer-led tools that are heavily accelerated by AI to allow one person to do a lot more than they could previously, kind of like a conductor conducting an orchestra or a director directing a film. But in that scenario, a lot of the intent, a lot of the meaning still comes from the story or the idea that someone or a group of people are wanting to convey. And then all of the richness of narrative design, all of the meaning that might be embodied into the piece or into the work still comes from some understanding of the human experience, or just from the desire to have some fun. But then beyond that, if AI ever does get to the point where it can basically do anything that the person can do, including feeling creative, I really hope we still use it as a way to help people to create. I hope in this kind of situation we could pick and choose the things that we want to design ourselves because we would enjoy it or because we'd get meaning from it, and then let AIs or systems of infrastructure, solve the problems that we feel are more mundane. So that would be a very optimistic way of looking at this, using all of these incredible tools, to help us do more, to help us self-actualize, as opposed to using all of these incredible tools to supplant people. If we ever get to the point where, let's say, a company can generate 50,000 AAA games in 10 seconds and then select the best 3 to sell, with absolutely no one actually working on the project, I think it will be, well, for me at least, quite distressing, because so much of what we do about this is about love, is about, wanting to tell a story. But thank you so much for the very insightful and probably quite prescient comment. Anyway, we're now in the space section. This is one of mine, if you can't tell.
I fear metaverses are going to be used in a dystopian manner, as a way to take a vacation in a beautiful but virtual environment when the real world is going to crap.
Yes, this is a perspective or position I've seen quite a lot of people take, especially in mainstream media and people that are just discovering Metaspace for the first time. And I think it's really important to be skeptical. It helps kind of enforce a better quality of conversation and make sure you don't just create nonsense or sell people nonsense. But at the same time, I don't think that Metaspaces will ever absolve us of the responsibilities we have to our physical planet. At the end of the day, I think Metaverses will do a lot of what books, TV, the internet have done for people at home, which is allow you to have more engaging, interesting, varied experiences on a Tuesday night in the home. But yeah, then beyond that, obviously, our physical planet isn't going anywhere, and it's up to us to make sure that it lasts a long time beyond just our lifespans. But yeah, in general, I think metaverses have a lot to offer to people, and while skepticism is really healthy, I also think it's up to us now as creators and enthusiasts to make sure that what we build is firstly meaningful and useful, and secondly important and fun. But we still have a lot of work to do with the rest of the world, obviously. Now let's just have a look in here and here. Any more orbs? Nope. Okay, let's continue on. Obviously you can quite tell that I like sci-fi from this area.
The Metaverse is inevitable. It'll be the closest humanity will ever be to a post-scarcity world where teleportation and magic exists. You can be anywhere and do anything. The first real breakthrough is going to be when a real-time game engine gets to the "it just works" stage. Once you can make something with your virtual reality hands seamlessly in a networked world, and make that thing do something without fiddling, that's when the fun begins.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting perspective. So for anyone that doesn't know, the idea of post-scarcity in the real world is where we're able, through the use of technology and resource management, to basically meet the needs of our entire population, almost effortlessly, to the point where the way we derive value from scarcity of time or resources isn't quite the same as it is right now. And as you can imagine, I'm sure it's incredibly complex to get to that point, and I don't think we're quite there yet by any means. However, in the virtual world, we could probably achieve a lot of the feeling of that by the way we can give people access to different kinds of spaces and experiences. And of course, we can break the laws of physics to our heart's content. We can break the speed of light, we can give ourselves magical capabilities, we can fly. So in that sense, the metaverse could be a really fun layer on top of our physical reality that people can experience. But once again, I don't think it absolves us of our responsibilities to the real world, or the notion that we need to continuously make it better for as many people as possible.
Very cool mini-verse. Honestly, hoping to God that Chris Roberts doesn't get wine about this. Enter new stretch goal here.
Now that's actually a very interesting point. Recently, I believe that Cloud Imperium Games actually announced that they had ambitions for Star Citizen to be considered a metaverse. I think it's because they believe that the complexity that they're building into their world transcends what we typically think of as MMOs or video games, in a similar way to, I think, what a few other games may have arguably achieved in the past, World of Warcraft, EVE Online, that kind of thing. And if you think of a metaverse as an embodied network of ideas and values and people, I think Star Citizen could probably meet those terms at some point, at least conceptually. Now, as to whether or not this means a pivot from what they're doing, I think it doesn't. I think they just think of Star Citizen as a metaverse. But to some extent, metaverse is just now a trendy term of saying something that you're building that is 3D and spatialized. So, as to what that actually means, I think that will change over time. Okay, now let's move to the final space in this short world I put together. So as we come to the end of this video, I'd just like to thank you for all of the incredible comments that you've put forward about the potentials of the metaverse, both the ones that I've featured and the ones that I didn't have time to feature. They've all been absolutely incredible. And as I've said before, I think the metaverse could be one of those transformative technologies in human history that absolutely changes the way we do things or think about things, if we build it properly. And now the task falls to creators, to enthusiasts, to techies, to prove to people that the metaverse is more than just the latest hot, trendy buzzword that you can use to effectively say nothing of value. We need to prove that it's a powerful tool that humanity can be proud of, that can be an asset to all of us. And I think we can absolutely do it. So the only thing left to do now is to move forward, start creating, and to explore. And as to where this takes us, there's only one way we'll find out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.